All right, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Thank you for joining us, especially the night that the film tour launches. I bet there's bet there's a few of you who are going to go watch that right after this. I'll be one of them. But yeah, we're super pumped. So for those that have not been here before, just a little overview of what we're doing. We got a hour-long discussion. It's a webinar format, so you can see us, but we can't see you. That doesn't mean you can't interact. So we have at the bottom of your screen, you have a chat button. Jen's managing the chat. Feel free to use that all night long, banter, small talk, whatever. If you do have questions, especially questions for Matt that you want us to answer, just to the right of that chat button is a Q&A button. You can enter your question in there, and we're going to go and work through that list as we go. That's really it. As you know, we will be recording this and we will send it out. It takes us usually a little bit just to get it edited and uploaded and all that good stuff. But we'll send it out for everybody that registered. And I really think that's it. So let's just get into it. We got a really special guest tonight. I'm extremely excited about this one. I'm ready. I got my notebook ready. Take some notes. We got from Adaptive Fly, Renzetti, man of many talents, Mr. Matt. What's going on?
Not much, man. How you doing?
I'm doing well, man. Thanks for coming on.
Not a problem.
Yeah, we give the folks a little bit of an intro. Where are you from? What do you got going on? And I think that'll kind of flow into a little bit of what we're going to talk about tonight.
Yeah, sure. My name's Matt Grajewski. For those that don't know, I'm sure most don't know how to pronounce it. Kind of throws everyone for a loop a little bit.
I just avoided pronouncing it.
Yeah, which is what, right? Like I was Matt G. I mean, not just growing up, like pretty much my whole life. That's the safest bet. If you were to call me Grajewski, I would look, you know. That's what it looks like. But born and raised in Michigan, you know, grew up just like a mile or so from the shores of Lake St. Clair, and eventually found my way to the west side of the state. I live in Grand Rapids. So fished for basically everything that swims in Michigan. And I spent, obviously growing up in Lake St. Clair, a lot fishing out there. It was mostly a perch and walleye fishery back then, some trolling for musky. Never saw anyone casting back in the 80s. And then tons of, trout fishing, steelhead, and then kind of did a lot of that for probably a solid 20 years, and then kind of circled back to much more lake fishing again, mostly Michigan, as you may have seen on your float. Hopefully you didn't, but it can be quite choked with fishermen in Michigan. So fishing lakes, you get away from that. Just not many fly fishermen take advantage of the incredible lake fishing we have here. So do a little bit of river fishing for muskies, not a ton. There's not a lot local to me, but definitely do some of it. But certainly lakes. My parents, I always joke, like we talked about, I was born and raised in a boat. So my parents were fantastic fisher people and taught us at an early age, like just how to constantly adapt to a lake, because it's always a puzzle every time you go out there. So that's where I learned a lot of that stuff, and that's kind of what I do a lot of now with both my brothers and my kids. So and then I tie a few flies here and there.
Just a few.
Just a few.
Awesome. And
quite a few yard sales.
Yeah, that's, I think, part of just to give folks an overview of where we're going to take this tonight.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of river fishermen on the last few, a lot of, river fishermen, frankly, using a lot of bucktail. And the cool thing about where the musky game is at now, thanks to a lot of folks like you and your brother who pushed it this direction, is there's a spectrum. It's not all one size fits all. Rivers, lakes, flowages, synthetics, bucktail, big, small, you name it. And I think a lot of what you've been putting together kind of it's different, but it serves a purpose in your fishery and a lot of other fisheries around the country. So that's kind of the overview. We're going to try and keep it on topic, but as we get into it, we're going to venture wherever. So whatever questions you have for Matt, they don't have to be about flies. He's got a shit ton of knowledge, and I've only been able to tap into a little bit of it on the phone with him, but it's pretty impressive.
Thank you.
But yeah, dude, really big props for joining and hooking us up with some of your flies. We don't have a ton left. I know people are going to be looking at some tonight, so I just wanted to get that out on the front end.
I'm starting to work on a few, starting to get them together here.
This guy's a machine.
A small pile.
Yeah, a small pile. I think
we're working on it.
Laser dub in the United States.
Hold on a second. Speaking of which, these are my laser dub.
Oh my god!
I mean, if you want to have a sleepover, I got everybody covered. This is just what I can pick up.
Oh my god! Is that what's that, a pound bag?
What's crazy is they're 4-ounce bags, but 4 ounces laser dub is a shit ton. I don't know, they're over gallon size bags, but it's crazy, the little packages, right? So I keep the little packages close and just refill these, but you go through a lot of these when you have to tie a lot of them, that at some point, I mean, the cost of those sounds ridiculous when you buy them, but those are at least 8 months old, and I haven't gone through them yet. And those are just the most common colors I use. Yep. The other stuff that's not as common, I still buy the little packages. But those are a very, very worthy investment if you use as much laser dub as I do.
There's probably not many people in the world that have that type of laser dub collection. Probably Eli,
Right, exactly, right. Yeah, for sure.
Good. Well, hey, man, let's kind of get into it a little bit. And we got some good questions already. We'll get to them, especially Aaron's really important question there.
Okay.
Well, why don't we just get that out of
let's just jump into them. A lot of the stuff we were probably going to talk about.
Yeah, well, Aaron up from Bob Mitchell's wants to know why lake anglers are just superior to river anglers. Let's
kind of dig into that, right? Without getting too competitive. So I've fished rivers since my parents, I was in a backpack with my mom walking the edge of trout creeks, in the UP. So I've lived for moving water for a very, very long time and still love it. A river is always going to take you to fish at some point, right? When you go into a lake, you could miss the fish completely by choosing the wrong spots. If you get in a boat and you float, it's going to, in most rivers, you can cast from bank to bank that have muskies. Obviously, there are some exceptions to that. It's going to take you to the fish at some point. So I think sometimes now I know some very, very good fishermen that exclusively fish rivers. So this isn't, it's not a knock. You may be missing some learning opportunities because you're not forced to learn as much as when you do in a lake. And lake change.
I'll just say it, Matt. I think it's harder. Fishing
it is harder.
It's harder to be successful.
For any species. Like I've had fishing lakes in the UP for trout is the hardest trout fishing I've ever done by far. It's just harder.
Yep. The rewards are there though, right? I mean, look at
absolutely. And I love so I get bored easily, and I love lakes. It could be literally the next day and it could be completely different. Whether the weather conditions, you have a high pressure system that moves in and it pushes the muskies shallow and into the weeds, but what weeds are they preferring during that time of the year? Are those weeds producing a lot of oxygen, or are those weeds on the decline in terms of oxygen? And so that's just a tiny tip of the iceberg of what you might experience when you go to a lake. The thermocline could change, and that's going to change where the ciscos are or the crappie are, and it's like and then a cold front could move in and then switch that thermocline again, and it's never ending. It really is. And then you have lakes like Lake St. Clair, like we talked about, even though it's predominantly shallow, those fish move almost daily. While sometimes you could have a few good days in a row in the same spot, you could be a mile away from the fish based on where the bait went. So it's I love that. The word that comes to mind is challenge, but I don't know if it's so much the challenge is it's constantly changing. And that was always the draw to me for musky fishing. Like it's not that I ever had any species like figured out, but I got to the point where I go steelhead fishing and I knew exactly what I was expecting. You know, I knew what was going to happen. I knew where the fish were. I knew what they were eating. And while I very much enjoyed fishing for them for a long time, it just, there wasn't that kind of that, I wonder what's going to happen today kind of factor. It was like not if, you know, if we're going to catch any, it was like how many we were going to catch or what spots would actually be open to fish was the biggest mystery of the day.
Yep.
Right.
That seems
a knock on steelhead fishing because I loved fishing for them and they're not an easy fish to catch, but musky, I just feel like you'll never fully know.
Yep. No doubt. And that's I don't know about everyone else on the phone, but that's for sure part of the attraction for us is just when you get close, just when you start to sniff what you think is a pattern, they just, you know, right here.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I wrote a blog a long time ago and I just kind of recycled it recently for Renzetti, but it was rule breakers. That's what muskies are. And the days when second day of a cold front, high pressure, bluebird skies seems like a pointless day to go and you catch 3, you know, and it's like, you know, it shouldn't have made sense in other days when it should be perfect and they don't want to move, you know. I haven't seen that as much with any other species that I fish for. If the conditions are going to be great for trout or steelhead or bass or anything else, they are going to be good. You know, they're at least going to be good. They won't baffle you as to like, what the hell happened today? But muskies will do that. And other times when you think it's a waste of time, you're like, holy, and again, right, muskies, you catch one and it's a successful day. If I'm going smallie fishing, one's not going to cut it, you know? So that's part of it too. But, and I like big fish. And when you can catch a small muskie that's 38 inches, like, I don't hate that.
Yeah. Well, and not to knock, we love fishing rivers. We probably fish rivers a little bit more than lakes, but you know, the numbers don't lie, guys. If you want to catch the biggest fish right now, it's likely coming out of lakes. You know, whether it's up in Minnesota where the current where Bobby's fish was caught, whether it's you know, over on the border a little bit closer to you, Lake St. Clair's got some big ones in there, like you know,
outside of a handful of river systems, and it might be a literal handful. You know, they don't have the forage really to grow them to that size. But I would say, you know, down Virginia, you know, Blaine catches, I mean, way more giants every year than probably most people really even know.
Yeah, no doubt.
There's just it's probably a handful of places that are when you're talking about 50+ inch fish.
Yeah, well, and even that like that untouchable kind of 55 plus, where it's just
right.
Don't really encounter a ton of those in the river.
No, not real ones.
Not a lot.
Not real 55-inch fish.
No, not taped and measured. No.
Right.
Well, as we're kind of working down this, we'll come back to a few here, but like I wanted you to talk about that because that background definitely, or at least I assume, impacted how you think about fly design.
Yeah, absolutely.
So talk us through, you know, whether we're just all river fishermen and we need to learn, or whether we don't know anything. Like, talk us through how that setting that you're in impacted some of what you've designed and how you fish it.
Right. So, like, when you think about rivers versus lakes, current versus no current, or even rivers with very, very slow current or sections with that. So, fly movement is easier to control in a lake, it's harder to achieve, like to start that, but once you start it, easier to control. Rivers, easier to get good fly action, harder to maintain, harder to really control it because you have other factors with current. So lakes they strip everything out of it. Like, I can take a fly in good current that looks like it's getting kicked around and it's getting pushed here and it looks good, and take it into a lake and it will come straight back to me. So what I've always told people is, if a fly swims well in a lake, it will swim well in a river. Like, I know, like you've told me, like, a lot of times, so the yard sale was a river fly. That's what it was designed for. And I know you said you get a lot of questions. I get a ton of questions. Like, I fish rivers though. Do I need this? And in a lake, it's really easy for me to control that side to side action because I don't have other factors working against me outside of drift speed of the boat, which I can control in a sense. But in a river, it should just never go straight. And that is the goal of any fly I tie. And I probably, just like anything, you learn more from mistakes. So flies that didn't swim well probably taught me just as much as a fly that did, because if I just threw it out there and it swam well, I might not have understood what I did right in that fly to make it do that. But by having flies that weren't swimming the way I wanted and I tweaked them, then that taught me a lot that I could apply to other stuff. Yep. But yeah, the yardtail started out as a trout fly. A lot of people don't know that. I mean, I couldn't tell you 15, 20 years ago, I'm not even sure. And it came off of after like designing the double deceiver for how we know it today, kind of, I didn't spend a lot of time online. So even stuff like maybe Mark Sadati was doing, I just didn't know. And it turned out that my version was a little bit different. But I forgot to bring bucktail with me on a trip to our family cabin and lost a color fly that I liked and searched through what I had brought, and Flash and Slinky was in there. And that's how the yardtail was born.
No way.
I wanted to get the same action. And so I was trying to figure out how to roughly create that same body shape with couldn't do it with marabou because I needed something stiff. And Flash and Slinky was what it was. And it was a trout fly for probably a good 6-7 years before it became a pike and musky fly, like where I kind of figured out that I started doing more of that fishing and then how to transition the proportions. Because it's like, it's a tricky fly to get right in the beginning, but once you do, it's relatively easy. So as you see, it's way more sparse than most people think. So like if you hold this fly up like this, it's pretty skinny, right? And that's part of the important factor of this. A little Flash and Slinky goes a long way. So if you put too much on this and it just bulks out, it won't swim well at all. And it won't
it needs that vertical profile a little bit.
Yep. You need that vertical profile. And Flash and Slinky is one thing cool about this material is this is what it's going to look like in the water. It's not really going to condense down. So when you even have bucktail, that will condense. And disclaimer, like we talked about earlier, nothing today is going to be a knock on bucktail. Every single fly tie has bucktail in it, including the tiny little bit back here where I put the rattle in. So I don't tie a fly without bucktail.
I just thought when you were designing this, you were just like, fuck bucktail.
Well, it wasn't even fuck bucktail. It was like, fuck, I don't have any.
Right.
That's how, in the trout version of this doesn't have any bucktail in it because I don't have a rattle in there, so it doesn't need it. But it is easy to use too much. And then once you do, not only are you losing that flat profile of like a glide bait, but what you're also doing is you're making a fly, and like one thing that's extremely overlooked is how is this fly to pull through the water, or any of them, right? So people think, I hear all the time like about how worn out people are when they musky fish. And for me, trout fishing is way more physically demanding. You're floating on typically faster rivers. You're trying to get casts out there, trying to get them back in. You got to take turns rowing. All of that is way harder than fishing. To me, muskies in rivers, and especially in lakes where you can go at your own pace, right? There's not that urgency, there's not that speed. But also, you're retrieving the fly, 90% of the time compared to casting, as long as you're not over casting and doing too many false casts. So the most energy you're using is when you're stripping the fly. And if you take two flies side by side, one that is overdressed and one that is a little bit more sparse, you feel the difference. It is extremely noticeable. And that's, I feel like, a very, very overlooked aspect. And you're killing your action. When you have to, just like if you're trying to pull anything through the grass with rope, the more there is to pull, the harder it is to pull it and impart energy into it. So if I pack my fly full of materials, when I impart energy into it, it soaks it up so fast that the fly doesn't really get a chance to move. And that's even like, I actually have, so you had like, grab some props, right? So this is the fly that I caught that just shy of 51 in November.
Yep. Oh yeah. Is that the one on figure 8? Was that the one on figure 8?
Yeah. And this is a 15-inch fly. I don't know if we can fit it all. And now it's been fished, right? So the bucktail, as you know, any flies that fished and dry, it's a little bit more compact down. When it gets in the water, it's going to puff back out a little bit. But this fly is as easy to cast than some other flies that I've cast from that that I felt like were overdressed that were half this length. You know, this isn't a walk in the park to throw, but I typically, when you get into this size range, 14, 15 inches, you know, I'm usually using a 450 or 500 grain line. This is not bad to throw. I threw this fly for a solid 6 hours without much issue. And then when you get down into the smaller stuff, like this single slip and slide, like I could throw this on a 7 weight if I wanted to.
Well, I was just about to bring that up. This has got to be, for its length, one of the lightest musky flies to throw.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing to it. Yet It's got the full profile. It's got all the factors. It's got the vertical, and that makes a difference.
And it's that's like one of the most important factors to learn in when is musky, larger pike flies, or anything where you're going to tie larger flies, is profile with the least amount of materials. And from this, as you know, you can see them because you have them in your hand. Like there is bucktail under here that props up this synthetic. So I can use probably half of what you would maybe think you could use on this fly. There's a little bit more bucktail for support going into the head. And then under that laser dub is a small spun bucktail head, which allows me to use way less laser dub. But the laser dub does a couple of things. Like one, I don't know how much the profile of it matters, but it looks good, you know. But also, I love to put eyes on my flies. It's much easier to put eyes on laser dub than it is on bucktail. And it helps reduce some of the buoyancy. So when you talk about another thing of rivers versus lakes, where some of the larger bucktail flies have a great, like are very beneficial in the river, is if you're fishing a lot of rocks and you want to keep that fly up out of the rocks, that buoyancy can really help with that. In lakes, I don't want that. I don't want buoyant fly. So even if I'm only fishing 8 feet of water and I can see the bottom, so the muskies can see the fly if it was literally on the surface, right? There's never a lot of places where I need to fish something that's real buoyant. So if anything, I'll use an intermediate line if I want to keep the fly higher. But it allows me to control a lot more if the buoyancy matches the action I want.
Yep.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does, because you're able to get them down without having too much head weight. Because if you have the head weight, now you're going to move the fly like this instead of like this.
Yeah.
Yep.
And even then, as you know, like any like suics and stuff like that, there is a rise aspect to flies that can be beneficial.
Sure.
In my experience, a fly that is going to turn to the side is going to produce more eats than one that doesn't, or even one that is a dive and rise. Because with a fly line, the dive and rise is really tough to control because your line is sinking, you know, at a much faster rate than braid is sinking when you're throwing a suic, right? So your fly never really has a time to rise very long. So the best action, I feel like, control, and any type of jigging action can certainly work. I mean, there's a reason why a jig is probably the most effective bait ever invented, because majority of dying fish fall to the bottom. We see the ones that float to the surface, but the majority of them sink to the bottom, become turtle and crayfish food. So that jig is an extremely effective bait. So any fly that drops, I feel like, is better than a fly that rises.
Yep.
Most days.
Yep. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Do we have any questions on that? Let me just do a check. Oh, here's a good one. As we're talking through, I noticed this as well. A question's from Aiden, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. You're schlopping. I think this is schlopping, right?
Yep.
It's schlopping. It feels like schlopping.
Mm-hmm.
Well, are you doing anything special on these tails? Because you keep them. They're very tight. They're flat. They stay in the right spot. Yeah. They always look the same. I mean, we got 20 of them here. Every one looks the same. What's kind of what can you share with us on that?
So there's a couple things. Like one, the material that you're starting with, and that's one of the things, right? You just learn through time. We're going from being a broke, trying to buy materials as a teenager to a broke college student, you start to realize the better materials you buy, the easier it makes really large flies. But I have the Whiting American saddles are, so I'll just pick an orange one here because that's what you had. These are amazing. These have the best schlappen I can find. Like, they're always going to be straight. They're always high quality. They're not cheap, but I think it makes a difference. Now, when I first started tying this fly in this size, it was the bag, the strung schlappen, right?
Yep.
Where you buy the bag. Now that's gone downhill a lot from the days that I was first using. That's what I used to always use on trout fly.
Doesn't look like this anymore.
Yep, no, it doesn't. Not even close, right? So the tail on the yard sail is so important to the fly swimming right. It needs to be stiff. And these are, like, this is the best that I found. So then the way that I tie them in, trying to, like, maybe we can do that another time. But it was something I covered with Schultz last week, is how I tie them in to keep them straight. There is a little bit of technique. I did, so John Ray from Mangled Fly was the one that shot the video we did for the yard sale, that he told me he's going to try to upload it this weekend.
Oh, that'd be huge, because I already see
Pretty sure cover it in that.
Yeah, and I already see another question from Mike Small. He wants to see, how to tie with laser dub. So that'll
yep. So the whole fly from start to finish with probably, I think, so John's sitting there there with me while I'm tying it. So there's some history to the fly and kind of what goes into it. So that covers a lot of it. And when that's available, I'll certainly post that on Instagram.
Yep. Awesome. That'll be super helpful.
I don't know if he's putting it on Vimeo or YouTube, but he's hoping by the end of the week we'll be able to have that up.
Awesome. That'll be sweet. I will for sure be watching that.
Because I tie it in the trout size and I tie it in the musky size, because there's that difference, like kind of how the weight is put in and the amount of weight. And we cover it. He's going to split it up into two, but I'll cover both of those.
Sweet. Well, that's good to know. We'll probably still ask a few questions today, but for everybody listening, know that's coming. It's going to go deep into the whole fly.
Yeah.
We do have a couple, though, that are just like quick and easy ones.
Yep.
And it's very much along the materials line. So just first of all, you mentioned Flash and Slinky.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of this stuff we're working on getting in at Musky Fool, but it's a Renzetti product, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yep. Yeah. So our distribution is that material side of Renzetti. And
yep. So a lot of the local fly shops will have it. Otherwise, just stay tuned. With Musky Fool, we're working on the RD stuff as we speak. A lot of good stuff over there.
Yeah. And then, a lot when you talk about your brushes and everything, a lot.
Yep. We had a question about, it said, please tell us about the eyes.
Okay. So the eyes, here's the thing for me with eyes. In musky flies, so they're so large, you have such a large canvas that, and the majority of the time it's you looking at the fly, not the fish. So I believe put anything on a fly that's not going to reduce its chances of success. The eyes, to me, from my experience, are never going to deter a fish from eating it when all of their prey and forage contains eyes, right? So I like the way it looks. It helps me control head shape, right? So like on the yard sail, for example, if I didn't put these eyes in, it would be hard to control that head shape as much.
It would poof out to the sides a little.
Yeah, out to the side a little bit. It can add weight where you want it. Again, I don't want my flies to be too buoyant. So these 1/2-inch eyes are going to add a little bit of weight to the front of the fly. And we can cover weight in general, I think.
Yep, that's coming up next.
We can get into that. But what I have noticed is in low light conditions, especially in lakes, one of the first things I notice is depending on which eyes you use, is the flicker of that eye. So as that fly turns to the side on the paws, that's a lot of times what I see. And this is, as you know, this would be could be a multi-hour conversation of muskies are predominantly visual feeders. It's not even close, right? It is for the most part, it is their only way of detecting prey is vision. So any little flicker, flash, anything when you see a fish in the water, like if a bait fish were to freak out, you see that flicker of that reflection off the scale. So any possible little reflection that could catch a muskie's eye. And typically, if it's a quick flash of reflection, it's going to imitate a fish that has made a sudden movement, right? If a fish is just slinking through the water, it's not going to be sending out a quick flicker of light or reflection. So that's what eyes are for me. I would never say that. I know some guys believe wouldn't fish a fly without them. That's not where I'm at. I love the way that they look. I'm tying little fish, so why not put eyes on them? And for all the patterns that I tie, it's very easy to glue them on.
Yep. What are you? There's a question in the chat about that glue. What are you using to make sure they stay nice and snug?
Yeah. So I think I have here one that's not. So any gel glue. So this is Scott's maximum strength here. It needs to be gel though, because your standard super glues like this crazy glue, the materials absorb it so fast that it doesn't allow the materials to adhere together. The material just soaks it up. So it needs to be a gel that's not going to cure right away. So really any gel glue, if you can find some that say, like especially for fabric where they can be washed, they can get wet, I think that can help. That Scott's maximum strength is an all-purpose glue, and meaning it can be something outside that you can glue. It can be in the weather. I think it's just more likely to last. And one nice thing too about the gel is you can really control how tight you may want to pinch the head and hold it till it cures. Or if you want a little bit wider head, you can kind of just work it without a ton of tension back and forth into the material, and then it'll bond and it hardens under there. So these stay, I mean, they're musky, right? They absolutely can get ripped off. It could take one fish, it could take 10, or it may never get ripped off if a tooth catches it just right. Or it gets stuck in the net or something. But any all-purpose gel glue should do it.
Awesome. Easy enough. So you mentioned it earlier, talking about weight, and they definitely just holding these. You know, you have the rattle. You definitely can see that you've been intentional about where you distribute weight on these. Talk to us about how you think through that, why it matters.
Yeah. So the rattle and the best, a lot of people may have heard me say this before, but the best example I could think of is if you had a trailer with too much wood in it, the trailer is going to push the truck and make it hard to control the truck. And you have a trailer, so you have a hinge at that where it's attached to your truck. And that makes it want to move, right? And that makes where you lose control of the truck. So that's all. And the reason why that is if you're coming down the hill and you have too much weight in your trailer, the weight takes longer to stop, right? So that the weight that I'm using, and in this sense, in the larger one, it's a rattle, is in the very, very back. So it sits right off the back of that hook. Now, they make little collars. So these are the large plastic rattles. And these I found were the perfect weight. Brass is too heavy. Glass will absolutely break, and it doesn't have a lot of weight. But if you're casting larger flies, the momentum it takes to cast those, throwing those beads back and forth will shatter that glass. But these large plastic ones are very durable. They have a metal cap. So I don't know if you can hear it, but they're very loud.
Very loud, yep.
Because it's metal on metal in there with that metal cap. And that metal cap, along with the metal balls, seems to supply the perfect amount of weight, and they're a lot more durable too. They make little rubber collars that you can put on these, because this is a jig skirt rattle for bass fishing, right? That's what these are. And they make little rubber collars that go around it that you can then tie to the hook, makes it much cleaner for a jig. But on a fly, use those because it makes it much easier to tie in, so you don't have this giant thing in the way as you start the fly. But the fly didn't swim the same. And my best guess is right, it's where the weight is. So whether it's that rubber collar that's helping absorb, there's some type of movement in the rattle that it's not accomplishing the same thing. And also the rattle is tied on the top of the hook. Let me grab a hook real quick. I feel like I have a few laying around. So just a regular size musky hook, which probably makes it easy to see on the video. So I want that rattle on the top of the hook, kind of right over the bottom of the hook, over the bend, so that the hook has to fight itself. So a lot of what I'm trying to do, because I don't want a fly to swim straight, is I'm trying to break things, right? That's essentially what I'm doing. If I didn't, it would swim perfectly straight, streamlined if I were tying it the way physics would want me to tie it, but I want to break it. So this weight tied right on top over the hook, I think wants the hook to turn and fight itself, but it's not enough weight to turn it over. And all of that is just helping that fly not swim straight because I'm breaking things. When I hang it off the back, it didn't have the same effect the same way. But I think it's because the hook doesn't have to fight it would be my best guess.
Yep.
So that's where I found is the most effective placement. So while it still helps on the single flies, it helps them not swim straight. It is much easier to achieve when you have a joint. So right, like this is our trailer, this is our truck. We have too much weight back here with the rattle. So when I put energy into that fly and I strip it, the back wants to drive the front. And because of the hinge, it forces the truck to the side. Now, once I've started that and my fly line is now at an angle like this because the fly's turned to the side, when I pull that line again, it has no choice but to turn and go back the other way. So that's where that walk the dog action starts to come in. And like I said, even if you're in a river or something, you're not on a straight line, it should just not go straight.
Yeah,
you know,
current will do it. Yeah,
turning. Yeah, it may want to keep turning the same direction, but that's okay too, as long as it's turning and showing that fish the profile, you know, the way a muskie or any predator wants to eat it. That's going to help.
Can you? Is there a scenario where you can have too much rear weight and it almost turns back on itself? Is that?
Yeah. So if you have, yeah, absolutely. So it's depending on the amount of material you have. Like I said, if I were to put a brass rattle back here, it wouldn't swim the same. It would be even noticeable difference in casting because those are heavy. So I use the brass rattles on jig flies and I tie it up front. That's my weight. That's really going to drop that fly. But yes, so that's where with the trout size ones, you know, and I use like 0.035 lead, it is through experience, I learned, depending on the size of that fly, how much lead I needed to add to the back of that fly to get it to swim right.
Yep.
Because otherwise, yeah, you're just dropping the back end.
I'm going to just kind of detour for a second because I got a couple questions before we started about, you know, we got a wide variety of folks on here. Experienced musky anglers, first-time musky anglers. And we got a couple questions from the beginners of like, how do you is the only way to get better at tying flies, tying more flies?
It really is. Yeah, it really is. There's no
and time on the water. It's not
time on the water, so you can see what they do. And I think I will say this because I've been asked this question a lot. Like, what's the biggest mistake like I can make, or when someone shows me their flies and says, honestly, tell me what you think. 90+% of the time, it has too much material. Like that is, you know. And again, like I'll just pick on bucktail because it's an easy one because bucktail flies are beautiful. And if you pack bucktail on there, they are gorgeous to look at. Not fun to cast, and they are much harder to swim. Now, again, if you're fishing in a lot of current, they have good buoyancy to them and it can really get kicked around, and that's great. But I think the overdressing of the fly comes from that thought that I need to push water as like a calling card to muskies, right? And that's where their visual feeders, the lateral lines are to accurately strike. There was a study done by, I think it was Loyola University, like if anyone wants to look that up. And they used 3 different muskies in their test, like groups, like 3 different categories. Normal, one with no vision, and then muskies where they dampen the lateral lines somehow. The fish with dampened lateral lines where they literally couldn't feel fed the exact same way and just as successfully as muskies with normal lateral lines, normal detection in that sense, because it's not a detection. The blind fish with lateral lines only struck the food they put in there when it was inches from their face. So like a muskie on average, and most fish can feel about its body length. So if you're talking about a 40-inch muskie, if that fly is within 40 inches of that fish, it can probably see it, right? So I see a lot of guys that at the detriment of the action of the fly, at the casting of the fly, as the energy it takes to move the fly, overdress these flies thinking that's what they need to attract a muskie, and it's just not. And I get that there's difference in water clarities and, you know, and all of that, but it still is vision. Even then, what can you accomplish with a fly? Like, obviously, your fly moving through the water creates waves within that water column, and those are going to send those out. if you're in a river, how far does that travel before it even gets lost in all the tumbling over rocks, you know, surface noise? And then in lakes, how far does that travel? But from what I've read and from what I understand, noise will be more of an attractant than what that fly is doing in the water itself in terms of sending out some type of attention that, hey, I'm here. And that's where like rattles, I mean, even Larry Dahlberg did an awesome thing with bucktails like years ago with different blades that just, it was the different noise that those blades were. He put a microphone under the water, and that's where you see a lot of the staggered blades now, like 9s and 10s, or a Colorado and a different, you know, a different type blade. It's a difference in cadence of noise, not like, even then, those are making much more of a disturbance in the water. We could never imitate that with a fly. We couldn't imitate a bulldog, a big rubber bait being ripped through the water. It's just not possible to imitate that.
I think there's also something we could take from that too, which is while we can't imitate it, it's not their primary way of you know, there's a reason people are having success on a fly without double Colorado blades.
Right.
And that's to your point earlier, they're visual. And you said at the beginning, muskies are rule breakers.
Yes.
So yes, there are probably a few fish out there.
There may be
lateral lines, or you know, they're acting a little different. That's
right.
The work.
And that's where it's my thing. Every time I go musky fishing, I try to stack the odds in my favor as much as possible. And the science says, my time on the water says, action over everything. I will choose a fly in a color I think would never work over a fly that is in a color I know for a fact works, if the one in the shitty color swims better every single time. So it action 100% first, you know, color, size, depending on the time of year, could be 2.
Talk to us a little bit deeper on that. I want to touch on this, and then I want to come back to another topic. Yep. But we talked about noise a little bit. Now talk about how you think about color and size, and when that changes for you, when you might make a change at the boat and the water.
Right. So every color is going to be almost exclusively down to each individual fishery. And in my experience, it is watercolor 100 times over forage in that one. Because again, muskies being visual, what color do they see the best? They're black and red in a couple of the places I fish is hands down the top producing thing. I've never seen a red fish. And sometimes I've found too, I wonder in areas with a lot of ciscos or a lot of crappie, is a difference. How do I stand out from all the other forage in there? I don't think it's a bad place to start if you're like, hey, I know they're feeding on ciscos in here. Over here, they're feeding on white bass or perch or whatever it is. It's not a bad place to start. But from what I found, even in the same lakes, if water clarities vary, like Lake St. Clair, you can go to 4 different spots and get 4 different water color and visibility. Okay. Different colors could work even though they're eating the exact same thing in all of those places. So it's what can they see? I mean, that's why everybody knows I fish a lot of black. A black in, whether it's black and orange, black and red, all black.
Tougher for the angler to see, but like underwater, you just got to trust it because they.
Yeah, when you think about when fish are majority of the time maybe looking up to a light background, dark, right? It's why it's such an effective night fly for any fish, black, because it doesn't allow color through it, right? So that's where it's like black I found works in any weather conditions too. Could be bright sun. It really comes down to what can they see the most. And sometimes in dirty water, it's what colors do those contrast. Like Eli's Mardi Gras color works great in like muddy water or brown, real heavy stained brown water. I think it's that, whether it's that pink that shows up well or it is a contrast to black, but it really comes down to understanding what colors work best in your specific fishery. And I think that you can, once you know that, you can take that other places. So the river that I do fish the most out of all of them is a river in the UP, and it has similar, just that Wisconsin, that dark tannic colored water, right? It's not dirty, but it's dark. And those flies, same ones I know work there, the same colors that work for Willen in Wisconsin and work. Yes, right. Pink, that color works extremely well in that your real like kind of like fluorescent oranges, like not like your dark, it's like more of a dark orange, but that's in its color.
Well, and you mentioned the Willen, like he loves that yellow and
Yep.
white and black, and that
Yep.
is, yep.
Yeah. And so that's what, like, I know a lot of times what is the forage gets talked about. Again, not a bad place to start, but I would start with what colors shine. Clear water is typically a lot of times your whites, blacks definitely work in all clear water, your yellows, your kind of browns, your more natural colors. And then in those, depending on your stain of your water, even if it varies like in a river, it's determining what, just the Muskies will tell you which colors they see the best.
Maybe I think about this wrong. I'm interested in your perspective, but when I'm going through the Musky calculus on the water, color is, for me at least, color is probably last. Like it's usually size. Am I at the right depth? Am I at the right speed? Is it the right action? And then if all of that has been worked through, I might start shuffle through colors. But I might just be a bad fisherman. But what's your
No, I mean, those things that you listed are extremely important. I mean, are you where the Muskies are? Is you can't catch Muskies when you're not in front of them, right? And then
I didn't find any on the Pier Marquette. I don't know.
Right? See, you're never gonna catch one there. You're never gonna. Maybe someday. I mean, we do have.
I even dove in the water to look. And
I heard all about that. So, yeah, where color starts to dominate for me is in places where I know it works. I know at this point in my fishing career and tying career, I know what the flies in my box are going to do, right? Like there's never, the experimenting never stops, you know, but what I will do is anytime I tie a fly that is where I'm tweaking something or doing something new, I always tie it in a color I know works. Because that's, at least it's going to tell me, well, maybe it was the wrong color. I can rule that out, right? But there's a handful of colors that I know work in the fisheries that I go, and it's a coin flip of which one I want to choose first. But yes, action, where you're at in the water column to the speed, like all of those things are outside of color, right? But if you know all of those things are right, then color absolutely can matter. Doesn't always, but I've had way too many days. And this is where I think lake fishing really helps too, is you have two people fishing at all times. There's never anybody rowing, right? And I can't tell you how many times I've seen all black work like crazy and black with a quarter of it red and they wouldn't touch it, or a quarter of it orange, right? And then you switch and you start seeing fish right away. So in that water, there was something where they could see it better, or there was something that they were looking for, and all black was it. Or times where black and red shined, and all black they wouldn't touch. You know, and doing the exact same things, right? Like my brothers and I fish where if you couldn't see our heads, we're all almost doing the same thing. We're fishing to the same water in the same boat, and one person's doing way better than the other, and we're doing exactly the same thing. The only thing different is the color. But I wouldn't put a ton of weight in it unless the Muskies tell you otherwise.
Yep.
So it's like, I'm not going to go into expecting color to be the thing. But if the Muskies show that to me, then I need to make a change.
Yep.
If I know the fish are there, if I know I'm doing things that I know that they like, or I've tried a number of different retrieves that I can accomplish with a fly and they didn't like, then maybe it's the color and I try that. And sometimes it is, but most of the time it's not, but it definitely can be.
And that's like, we've hit it a couple times, not to like sound like a broken record, but as soon as you start to establish rules with these fish, you get lost. So while I'm up here saying color doesn't matter, like go ask the boys in Eau Claire if color matters. They were fishing black and orange and they crushed it.
And right, fish, I mean, the musky fishing as much as anything, fish bite on confidence. So throw what you think will work. It's like I know guys on Lake St. Clair that love white, and I know gear guys throw your solid white Poseidons and solid white Bulldogs, and they love it. And like Eric will say, we never catch anything big on white. all of our big fish come on black. And it's like, well, we fish it the most and probably with the most confidence. And we'll try white for like 5 minutes and be like, that was stupid.
Get out of here.
Right? And every once in a while we'll say like, I'm trying white today. And then after, Eric catches 2 fish, I'll be like, fuck that. Like, let me put something on. I know that works.
Dude, that's my relationship with Fire Tiger right there. It's just
I know there's a lot of places it does work.
But it's not for me.
But it is the best fisherman catching color of all time because, I mean, it looks great.
Has been for a long time.
I will say where I get my Fire Tiger fixes with pike, right? Like anything chartreuse is borderline cheating.
Yep.
My Fire Tiger fix with pike, but in the waters I fish, it just doesn't do much. But there are places I know it does.
Yeah, no, it does. We have some lakes.
It works very, very well.
It's almost what you should be always throwing for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I got one more, and then I have several questions coming in from folks. But
I'll stay as long as you want to stay.
All right. Awesome. We'll just keep pumping full of what do we got? Some questions here. But kind of continuing the theme of Matt's Musky Mythbusters. Talk to us. You and I chatted about this before, but I want to lay the groundwork for the feed bag myth. Like, what's your perspective, and like, what should people take away from this?
So, based on the science and everything I've read and what I've experienced on the water, I understand why it exists.
And what are we talking about?
The feed bag myth is that muskies feed more in the fall. And where that is a myth is muskies are cold-blooded, so their metabolisms reflect the temperature, and their temperatures drop when water temperatures drop, which means they need to eat less. Muskies feed more in the summer than any other months of the year, season of the year. But because they're not worried about expending energy in the summer, they follow a lot. So it's like in the fall, it's like, man, every fish we saw ate, feed bags on, right? They're down. Or when you hold them in the boat and they shit all over the place, if those females start producing eggs, there's not much room for food inside that stomach. Those females start producing eggs like in September. So when you talk about when you get into late October, into November, into December, those eggs are maturing so much, there's not a lot of room for the stomach. So when you hold a fish and put your hand up under its stomach, it squeezes shit out of it. It's not because it's stuffing itself to where it's shitting all over the place, right? So I see why the myth exists, because it's like every fish we see is eating. I get them in the boat and they shit all over the place because they're so packed with food. But it's just not true. Biology doesn't support that. Their metabolisms are dropping so much that if they're going to expend the energy, they're going to eat. So to use people understand this in steelhead fishing, right? If you're going to swing flies in the winter, it's extremely tough. But if you find a player, it is very good odds it's going to eat. If that fish is going to expend the energy to chase it down, they may pluck at it a few times, but there's a really good chance don't leave that fish it's going to eat. If it's going to use the energy it wants to eat. Same thing with winter trout fishing with streamers. If they move, there's a high chance they're going to eat. But come springtime, you can get a bunch of chasers. Why is that? They're eating more during then than ever, but they don't worry about expending the energy because they're going to replace it. So that's where that's the myth.
How do you layer in though? I totally get it. How do you layer in the kind of like big fish fall? Is it more like from my perspective? Maybe it's more if I'm going along your train of thought.
Mm-hmm.
They do have like this. The windows get tighter and the location of the fish maybe becomes more predictable. Whereas in summer it's everywhere.
Yep. So yeah, absolutely. So especially when you talk about rivers, you have winter holes and fish are going to start to pack into those winter holes. Now you have more competition for food. You have females starting to change their preference for size of a meal. Again, in Lake St. Clair, the reason why I throw this size fly in end of November and December is because if that female is going to move and expend energy, she needs something that's going to help her. She's producing eggs. She's using energy even if she's not moving. So she needs that nutrient. So if she's going to move, she wants to eat something big. And if she is going to move, she wants to make sure she's not wasting energy. But again, now you're talking about more competition for food, which is always going to make every fish. Steelhead fishing, like you just experienced, if there's 2 fish in that hole, hell of a lot harder to catch than if there's 10. When there's 10, you got to shit or get off the pot when that nymph is drifting down the river, right? And that's exactly what you experience with muskies in those wintering holes, is you have more competition for food.
Yep. And that's like, I love that. I love that because I think it's a myth. We hear it up in Wisconsin, like, oh, summer's here.
Yeah.
Fishing. And yeah, if the water temps are 80 degrees, like, don't go fishing for muskies. Yep. But if you have the right conditions,
yeah,
it can be. I mean, you can get players all day long. Yeah, you're gonna get follows, and you're gonna have to find fish and work through all different spots. But they're eating. You know, they're eating.
Yes. Yeah, they're burning because their metabolism is so high. Just because of the water temperature, they have to feed more often. And right, anybody that's serious muskie fishermen, we call pike dumb, right? And pike are just as dumb as their stomachs. A pike's metabolism is so much higher than a muskie's by nature's design. If muskies had the same metabolism of pike, they would just wipe out a fishery and it would be a desert in a matter of time, right? It's the same thing with how terrible they are at spawning. It's nature's design, so they don't wipe out a fishery. But a pike's metabolism is so much higher. There's more pike, more competition for food. They have to eat more often and they have to take more chances. That's what makes them dumber. A muskie doesn't have a higher IQ than a pike. They're just both as dumb as their stomachs. So in the summer,
I just thought that's why I wasn't catching any muskies.
So, muskies are dumber in the summer, but they're much more willing to follow. They're going to feed more often. So expend energy, curious. I'm going to check that out. Not interested in that. Oh, there's a Cisco. I'm just going to eat that. Right. And then where you talk about in the fall, a big female may feed once every 3 or 4 days, depending on the size meal she ate. So to be in the right place, right time, when she decides she wants to eat is actually harder. The only thing that is more predictable is their locations. Like you said, in the summer, they can be spread out all over the place, even in rivers, up and down that river. But in the winter, they're going to condense down, pre-spawn. They're going to start to condense down. But in the summer, yeah, they could be all over the place.
Yep. No, this is really cool too. And I hope it's informative to everybody listening, because it gets me thinking about, like, when you get to see a muskie or a follow or you get a swipe, take that data, that behavior, depending on the time of the season, where they were, what they were chasing, to help you seal the deal. That's super cool.
Yeah. The data is huge because, like, even on a lot of the local lakes to me here, when I was learning them years ago, my younger brother and I, Mark, a lot of people don't know I have a younger brother because he's not a guide. He's not selling commercial flies. He doesn't work for a fly fishing company, but he's a really, really good fisherman. We do have a younger brother.
Newsflash.
we would never blind figure 8 because we learned that if the amount of fish that we would get eat on a blind figure 8 was so slim compared to if I just twitch it deep at the boat, muskies would show, one that was tracking it deep would show up. And we could say, okay, this is where they are, this weather pattern, this water temperature. We started to learn where they were. Once we knew where they were, we could confidently know we were throwing to fish, right? But if we were blind figure 8ing all the time, we would have saw a fraction of the fish that we saw that would show up late at the boat by twitching the fly deep.
Okay,
they would rarely eat. Yeah. They would rarely eat, but they would show up. And if, maybe 1 out of 100 of those fish, if we had blind figure 8, may have ate,
Do you still do that? Or is that twitching technique more of you're trying to just speed up the learning curve?
Yeah. Well, I would say this. One, because of this bad boy here, it makes it very hard to get right to the edge of the boat, and I can't bend at that knee, so figure 8ing all the time just kills my back. So
let me pause. For all the folks who have 2 legs that are bitching about how hard musky fishing is, like, this is the time where you shut the fuck up, because this guy's catching 51s on figure 8s with 1 leg. So
you just power through it.
Yeah, power for Christ's sake.
So the only time I typically blind figure 8 is if I know we're fishing a spot where we saw a big fish, where we moved a big fish and we went back on her later. Or maybe we had seen a couple of fish back to back in one condensed area and we know they're there. That's where I'll mix in some blind figure 8s. I would, though, advise most people to always blind figure eight if you just want to catch a muskie, or you want to catch 5 muskies next year instead of 1, because that will produce fish.
Yep.
But we had learned in those fisheries I was talking about too, they rarely eat on the figure eight, even when you have one coming in hot. A lot of fishing pressure. They've seen that boat side shit so much that we've actually, some of the ones we've got to eat there was literally by letting the fly sink, and sometimes 10 feet, and they would go nose down and follow that fly down, twitch it once, and they just eat it.
Wow.
That has worked just as much or more than figure eight. So try everything.
Yeah.
In the late fall, that boat side twitch can be better than a figure eight sometimes.
Yep.
And whether you can see the fish, just keep it away from the boat a little bit so you have room to work. Twitch it, let it die. Twitch it, let it die. In the late fall, sometimes that works as well because they want an easy meal. It's day to day. Let the fish tell you what they want. But
I was just about to. Yep. Like, but if you know, there's different strategies. There's the aggressive top corner. You know, really, all of those are tools in your tool belt, or they should be. You know, it's the time and place. And like, for instance, up in Wisconsin, where we have that more tannin stained water. Mm-hmm. We don't see, there's days where it's too dark to see follows. So you do have to blind figure eight just to know if there was anything behind you. Right. Could have been tracking you from a foot down. Like, muskies are notorious for tracking below the fly. And depending on your water clarity, if they can see your fly from 3 feet down, but you can't see 8 feet down, you can't see them. They can see your fly, but you can't see them. And that's where like blind figure eights are. Muskies are notorious for turning off and circling back, right? Like, I can't tell how many times Eric will tell you, clients will be like, it came out of nowhere from under the boat, you know? Did we just drift over it? Maybe, but what it likely did was, I mean, you guys that have used underwater cameras actually see the muskies use the boat like as a way to hide, you know, in that shadow of the boat when they're just stalking their prey. Yep. Well, and it's just, I'm going to hit it again. Like, there are no rules, because for every aggressive figure eight I've got one on, you know, I've seen fish come up to the fly just sitting next to the boat as I'm sitting there like defeated, and it's just and it eats it. And it eats it, right? So I think Eric's probably caught. I mean, it's got to be somewhere in the ballpark of 5 or more muskies while texting. Retrieves a fly back to the boat. Picks up his phone to respond to a text, and he has video back when he used to wear a GoPro more. Now, granted, St. Clair, a lot of times you could be like in 2 footers, so that fly is also doing this. Sure. But he has video of one that eats. You can see the fly in the corner of the video just sitting there, and he catches like a 45 that just eats while the fly's bouncing in the waves, because it's just food, right? And they decided, hell, this thing's just sitting here, you know. Obviously, fly materials do have a lot of, you know, lifelike, you know, actions to them if they're just bouncing in the waves. So even if it didn't, like, it just decided this thing. I don't know if that's like a good thing or a bad thing. I'm picturing like a whole new type of guide trip where you just have to sit down and check the whole day, and the fish will come to you. Right? You know, I've always heard of in Wisconsin with people like on the rivers, if a client can't cast, is put them in the back and stir the soup, and just literally just figure eight till you get tired and sit down and stand up and figure eight again, whether the boat drifts over a fish or the guy in the front pulls a fish in, and then, you know. Yeah, well, and what we do, man, you're exactly right. Like, when you've hit that point where you got to go in, or you're just too beat up and you got to push to the boat landing. Mm-hmm. Just drag it. That person in the back is always going to be dragging a fly. Yeah, absolutely. Because it's happened enough where you just don't know. Yep. I had a guy in Minnesota catch, I don't remember if it was Minnesota or Wisconsin, a gear guy using flies by just putting them in the rod holder with a weight and dragging it like a sucker, and he's caught fish. You know, because it does you're just dragging it, moving the trolling motor, and the flies it just looks like a fish down there kind of chilling, kind of dying. When the boat stops, the fly sinks, kicks up the trolling motor, it moves, it sinks, and he's caught. All of a sudden, rod doubles over in the holder like a sucker. Yeah. No, it's the spectrum of them, man. I mean, got them eating worms on slip bobbers in spring. Yeah. You got them taking down fucking 8-pound carp, and, you know, like. Exactly. That's what makes it fun. We are cruising past our time though, and I do have a lot of questions coming through.
It was Robbie on Today's Angler. I saw that. There's actually I have a video of one of the ones. I think it was the first one that he caught.
Yep, I remember that video. We'll try and post that for folks that don't know which one.
That was I caught that on I think it was on a yard sale that we gave him.
That's cool. Okay, let's see if we can get through some of these. Blah 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 blah.
And anybody can hit me up on Instagram later if they had a question that didn't get answered or they think of one later. I'll do my best to answer everybody.
Yeah, definitely take him up on that. He's extremely responsive on Instagram. You'll also get to, Google over the massive amount of amazing flies that are on his page. Before we get into questions, tell us a little bit about what you're doing, what's going on. There's some crazy cool flies that you're putting out there. They're kind of like get them while they're hot. What's the story there?
So both of these here, I think both might be on the website, is there are colors that just don't work for me, or I like to color. This is a fraction of my markers, probably about maybe almost half of them. That I have these ideas in my head, or I see like anyone wants color inspiration, Team Rhino, like check out their like website. You scroll through all of them or their Instagram page. And I'm like, oh, that would be cool for a fly. But it's not in colors that always work for me. So I tie them for fun. So I had this drawer full of flies that were just fun flies because I used to work in web design for like 15 years. And this has now become like my major creative outlet is doing this stuff. And so I just, hadn't built a site since the last Renzetti site. So it's been like 3 years. And I thought, why not try to sell them? And I haven't used Shopify before. Let's learn that because something to do.
Yeah.
I like to always, like we talked about earlier, I just get bored easily and I just need to be learning stuff. So those are all listed on there. I'm going to try to make an effort when I finish this latest order for Musky Fool to get more on there at a time because guys are like, I paid $24 in shipping this week because I bought one, and then you put another one up the next day, and I bought that one, and I get it. I threw like 15 or 20 of them up there that I had sitting in a drawer, and they sold I thought they would sit there for months. I really did.
Dude, no way, man. They're amazing.
I've left all the ones on there that I've sold in case people just want to see some of the other ones. I have had people literally go on there, screenshot them and say, can you tie me this one, tie me that one? All of them are flies that take more time, so they are priced more, whether it's the coloring, the dyeing of the feathers. I price them according to the amount of time that they take, right? So you have the standard yard sale, $30. If I'm just coloring with markers, they're $35. If I'm doing markers and dyeing, they're $40. And it's just because they all take more time.
Yep. And what's the best way for people to say just follow you on Instagram and like get them while they're hot?
If they want to see them, I've usually posted all of them when they go like live on the site.
Yeah,
that's the fastest way to do it is to follow me on Instagram and see when I post it. But sometimes they're gone and I've had them like 3 minutes. So sometimes they sit there for a little while. Like it's got to the point if a fly's there for a week, I'm like, maybe I should just give this one away. But I'm like, it's just sitting there not doing anything. So
expectations are changing.
And then like the next day someone will buy it. Well, it's like always an excuse to tie more. So right now it's just a matter of time. My middle son plays travel lacrosse and school season's starting. So it really comes down to time, but I'm going to try to get some more on there.
Good stuff. And there's lots of, if you can't get those, there's lots of opportunities. So as Matt's mentioned, we're going to have a ton of them. We're going to try and keep a lot in stock because they're some of the best flies out there. Of course, adaptive flies where we can find you. You're still tying the made to order stuff in addition to the one-off stuff.
Yes.
You can still reach
out. And that's all on that site. There's the pre-tied flies, which are like the ones we're talking about. Then there's like an order flies page that lists the patterns that I sell, like kind of gives a very brief overview of rough size, kind of the action and what you can expect with each fly. And my turnaround time's usually been 2-3 weeks. That can vary. I think you're like, I always want to make sure I'm getting like stuff to you in a timely fashion, but I try to I try to keep my orders to where I can always meet like that 2 to 3 weeks, because I wouldn't want to order something and have to wait 6 months or 3 months to get it. So I try to, whether it's the size of the orders like we talked about, like your orders are the only big orders that I do. It's most part been a dozen or less.
Well,
so
we appreciate it. We appreciate it. We know we take an ample amount of laser dub out of your bag.
You also help me buy more, so it all works out.
There we go.
Just recycling it.
There we go. All right, everybody. Well, let's knock out some of these questions. Yeah, Matt, you've been amazing. As the comments have suggested, we're gonna get Matt back. We're gonna talk all Musky all the time. The guy's got a ton of awesome knowledge. We'd love to get your brother on too, but both of these guys, go check them out if you haven't already. They're masters at the trade. They're doing the right stuff. But
yeah, that's the other thing too. Like you mentioned, if you want to fly fish Lake St. Clair, whether it's for smallmouth or muskie, obviously I'm biased. I think it would be really, the amount of time Eric has put out there and the way he's learned that fishery. I really think that I really don't believe there's someone out there fly fishing that lake better than he is. Maybe there is, or maybe just as well, but I don't know who that is. He is, again, I'm biased. He's a good guy. He's easy.
Let the fish speak for themselves, though. Like, holy shit.
In the boat, and he's a wealth of knowledge. At the very least, as you know, anytime you go muskie fishing, guide trip, it shouldn't be the expectation to catch one. It should be to learn, and you will, hands down, you will learn and obviously have a good chance at catching one too. And
you'll be fishing really good flies. That's for sure.
Yes. It'll be all like mine and Eli's, probably vast majority of it. Last fished with him in December, he caught a fish on one of his flies and he was like, oh sweet, I haven't caught one in a while. He just doesn't have the time to really tie them.
Well, and why even try when he's got, seriously.
Yeah.
Just calls you up. Cool. All right, well, let's rapid fire these. You held up a couple times, but what was the 15-inch fly you caught the 51 on? Was that just a big yardtail?
Well, no, this is a slip and slide, and this is in the XL pattern, and this is, again, like maybe topic for another day, but this is 3 sections. And one of the keys is a lot of times 3 sections, guys want to throw a shank in the middle. And again, it depends on what you want to do. If you want like a really kind of like slinky action, slow pull it where it does that, it's fine. But the rattle, it is the same first 2 hooks, and the rattle is exactly where I put it on all the flies, then a shank in the back to be able to lengthen that fly. If I were to just drag out this synthetic to the length I want, it's too much drag. By being able to add the shank, a little bit more bucktail before we get to the synthetic, it allows it to not have a ton of drag and slow that fly and be able to turn. To turn a fly this large is not easy to do, and to be able to throw it all day. So this is, in that XL pattern, the slip and slide and the devil dancers are the ones that I do it the most with, as well as the slippery devil, which is one I just kind of put out there recently, but it's a fly I've used for 4 or 5 years. It's basically the difference is it's got a feather tail instead of a synthetic tail, so that it's got the head construction, which is really important for turning a large fly. That this has. But yeah, this is now these aren't on the website or anything, and they're very time consuming to tie, so currently with the volume that I'm tying, it's hard to do. But if it's like late fall or something and you're like, I really need something big, hit me up. I will, depending on how busy I am, I may tie these.
And or if you're tying your own, you got a little bit of Matt's secret sauce, how to put it together, just a different way.
And I have posted on Instagram before, and I could always dig it up, the kind of the naked platform of this, no materials, just the hook placements, bead placements, and shank and rattle, and it's just laid out on a table so you can see.
Let's put a pin in that, if you don't mind. I'll hit you up after. We'll repost that maybe next week, and
for sure.
You can post it. We'll share it just so people see it. I think there's a few questions about that fly, so that'll be sweet. Just to keep the butts moving, we're gonna just get through questions and then wrap for those still with us. Talk about how you're connecting the flies, like the hooks.
This is 7x7 strand coated wire. So quick public service announcement. I would always advise people to use wire. Muskies are not leader shy. Like musky leaders for gear, fluorocarbon leaders exist because of the action of the lure you're trying to obtain, or the stiffness of the leader on like or softness of it on a glide bait. So It's not because muskies are leader shy. If you are going to use fluorocarbon, 120 is usually the minimum. 130 is a little bit more bulletproof. If you attach a fly to that and try to swim it, good luck. 30 to 40 pound 7x7 strand coated knottable wire is soft for very good action with flies, and you're not going to miss that fish of the lifetime, that muskie. I mean, why would you want, even if you didn't care about that, why would you want to leave this in a fish? You know, if you actually hooked that fish and it broke and this is in there, it's not going to rust out. We're talking about freshwater. That fish will die if it hinders it from eating. Yep. So public service announcement.
+1 on that. Yep.
Always use wire. If someone tells you otherwise, I'm going to be a dick for a minute. It's just a lack of experience or knowledge. Right. Okay. So
is that what you're using? Is that what you're using? Like this?
Yeah. So that's so the key with any articulated fly for me is the connection needs to be stiff, because I don't want the connection to flex. I want to control the movement with the loop, and I don't know how easy it is, the loop around the eye of that rear hook. Couple reasons. I don't want the fly to foul, right? So yep. Like fly, when I just hang it here, it does not touch itself. So I don't want it to foul up. And
the beads help with that a little bit, right?
The beads help, absolutely. The beads are simply here to stiffen the connection, and I control the tension of the size of that loop. The further I slide the beads back, the tighter it is.
Yep.
The tension I want is just short of stopping the fly from moving. So if I were tying this and I were wrapping back on this on the wire here closer, I go closer and closer to the beads. If I were to go so close that this back hook can't move, I take 1 or 2 wraps off. That's how close I want it to be, so I can control, just like the hinge truck to a trailer, you know, on a hitch. I only want it moving left and right. I don't want this thing to be able to swing way up, because again, I want to create that side movement, and I just need a hinge. That's all I want. So this needs to be stiff. 65 pounds gets me stiff enough, and it's obviously strong. Being 65 pound.
That's still the 7x7, or is that?
Yep, because and it needs to be the coated, just like you would use for a leader. Because if it's not, the coatedness actually gives you a little bit to bite into when you're lashing that on that front hook, less likely to slip. And the non-coated, for anyone that's tried it, it sucks to cut. It frays. It's just a mess to work with. So I always use the coated. So yeah, this is the same type of stuff I would use as a leader material, just in a much, much heavier poundage.
I love it. I love it. And for folks asking, we've been saying it for a couple weeks, American Fishing Wire is on the way to Musky Fool. They've had some issues in the backlog.
Yeah.
You know how it goes.
Like everybody has.
Yep.
Yep.
But the cavalry is coming. Here's an interesting one, and I know this could be a touchy subject, and we got maybe this one and one more, because we don't want to keep Matt all night. Is an 8-weight big enough for smaller patterns? So it's both a question of, can you cast it on an 8-weight, and would you fish it on an 8-weight?
Right. So yes, like these two here, I absolutely could cast on an 8-weight. So an 8-weight, you're probably looking at roughly a 300 grain line. So yes, I could. I don't know if I would want to, like, if I totally get it. It's a big thing to invest into musky fishing. So it's like an 8-weight's all I got. Maybe you fish like creeks in Kentucky where you don't see a lot of fish like over a certain size. Or if you're right, some fisheries, a 40-inch fish would be a big fish. Muskies are, as you know, for their size, are not hard fighters. So if I really use that rod and I don't put a lot of flex in it, and I just cork that fish, like keeping a relatively straight rod to it, yeah, no problem. I could, right? It's like I could complete a golf course with just a 7-iron. But if that's the only club I had, and I'm like, man, I would love to try golf, see if I like it, go for it, right?
Put wire on your leader.
Yeah, as long as you put wire on your leader. In fact, Eric and I kind of laughed because that big fish that I caught last fall, like the real big one, it fooled us a little bit. We thought it was like a 46, really fat 46, 47. That the fight was taking longer than I liked with a muskie, that I straight routed that fish and was just pulling it as hard as I could and just dragging this thing. And in hindsight, I wouldn't have fought it like that. But if I were using an 8-weight, I do not want to, right? We're all trying to land those fish as quick as possible. Please use a net, like a large net made for muskies where you're not going to damage the fish, keep them in the water as much as possible. When you get that boat to the, but yes, reduce the fight as much as possible. Because muskies, while they don't fight super hard, you can't just drag them in with an 8-weight and they will expend that energy, and depending on those water temperatures, right?
And that's our take too. There are some 8-weights that feel like 10 weights. Like, can you do it? Yes.
Right.
You only have one rod. I get it. But if you're asking for his recommendation, if you're asking for ours, I think you heard it loud and clear. Like, size up, probably a 10 at the minimum, and it's gonna pay off. If you get that fish of a lifetime.
Right. And then just the effort it takes to throw those flies. Again, like this is in the musky world, this is small, right? This is probably in that 8-inch range. This is on that smaller end. It was still going to be a lot easier on a 10 all day. And then if I do hook a fish, burying the hook, right, as we all know, is one of the harder things to do. And it's the hardest thing for people to learn is to not use the rod. Again, like all things musky, there are always times where the rod can be your friend, depending on the situation. But with a 10-weight, a stiffer 10, if you make a mistake, there's gonna be a better chance of you pinning that fish and keeping it.
Yep. Well, and not to mention, if you're out in the middle of Lake St. Clair and a 12-mile, 15-mile-an-hour wind starts blowing, you're gonna wish you had at least a 10.
Absolutely.
So, I think I want to get some more of these guys. We'll do it on Instagram. Hit up Matt. But I said 8:15 is the cutoff. We're blowing into 8:30, so we are going to wrap it up. But Matt, any other plugs? Echo fly rod.
Okay.
I'm going to preface this.
Yeah.
We will not be getting the Echo Musky rod anytime soon. We are bummed. Because they won't sell it to online fly shops.
That's why I didn't want to bring it up.
I get it, but I like all things musky. I'm not in this just for musky fools, so I want to give you a shout out, talk about it, give us the plug.
Yeah. So I actually have the original prototype sitting right over, and that's what I caught that fish on.
Oh, that's so cool.
That was cool. But so the Echo Musky rod, again, bias here. I love it, but I should. No one should help design a rod and be like, I don't like it. If you do what's right, what's wrong with you? How do you have input on something like that and not like it? So I like it. A couple reasons. Like one, I'll start like kind of from the bottom up. The grip is extremely comfortable for me. Everybody is gonna like a different grip. It is small diameter. Most larger rods, when you start to get, so it's rated for 400 to 500 grain line. They call it like an 11-weight. Again, 400 would typically be more towards the 10 side, 500 more towards the 12. So right anywhere in between. The grip is extremely comfortable. And again, you're holding that rod for a long time, a lot of casting. So if you like a smaller diameter grip, you will like that. For me, that larger grips cause hand fatigue for me. So I don't love that. They do make it in different sizes. The 8'8", again, if you're fishing like out of drift boats or like smaller, like your flat bottom boats, your John boats. I mean, I use the 8'8" in my lake boat. I'm 5'8". I'm not Rick Kustich, who is much further away from the water. The 9'4" probably fits him much better. They're both way lighter in the hand than you would think. They're very, very powerful rods. I'm a pull the fly out of the water, go back, go forward, go back, and let it go. That's my maximum amount of false casting, right? And with that rod, it does it. And again, for our next chat, you don't want to cast too far in musky fishing. Trying to pin a musky at 90 feet with a fly line that's stretched.
Happen.
Why do it? If you're in a lake and you can cast that far, fish your water, move over and fish that water and cast 60, 70 feet, right? That rod does it like pretty effortlessly. It's a little bit softer in the tip, so strong through the butt, softer in the tip, so you have that feel in the tip, but it's not like a soft rod, but it has good feel to it. Yeah, I'm obviously a
Awesome.
big. The price point, I think you would be. I really don't think you can find. It's as good as any rod at that price point, if not right at the top of the list.
Yep. So everybody, go check it out. I think it should be dropping like any day or week.
Some shops have their hands on them.
If you get your hands on it, tell Echo you want to see it at Musky Fool.
I sent a text, but they're having a hard time. Like even the for the like the pro side of things, they sent out you can't order them right now. We got to get them to shops first. So that's supply, right? Supply chains for everybody right now sucks.
Yep.
But once they have them, I think they're a great rod. There are other great rods out there too.
Yep. There's your brother's throwing something else, and we got
right. He's on that G Loomis thing, and those are fantastic rods. If you're looking at something at a different price point, I don't think you'll be disappointed at what is like $295 or something. Yep. I was blown away when they told me that's what they were.
Crazy. The Muskies don't know which rod you're using. So.
They sure don't. My whole life I've caught fish on shitty gear. I appreciate nice gear and it can make your life easier, but yes, they all catch fish. That's always my answer. Which rod? They all catch fish. Find which one you like. I can tell you what price range you want. I can name some stuff, but they all catch fish.
Yep, and as you hear from us guys, like we want to be able to talk about all the gear, even if we can't get our hands on it. We'll hopefully share our opinion, and that's what you can come to expect from us. So we appreciate that you giving us a little color on that, Matt. And honestly, I speak for everybody on the line. Like this was awesome. I mean, there's like several comments that are like, we need to do this again. We need to go longer.
I can do this every week if you want.
Yeah, you're a wealth of knowledge. We're going to get you back on soon. And I think people are just chomping at the bit to get out for the 2021 season.
Right on. Yeah, I feel that too.
Thank you. Any last plugs on your end? Anything you want to sign off and say?
I don't think so. Like I said, if anyone had questions they didn't get answered, like Instagram's the best way to get a hold of me. Don't message me on Facebook. I look at it like once every 3 weeks. I just have the business page. I don't have a personal page. It's not my thing, but Instagram, you can definitely hit me up. Again, I'll do my best to answer if anyone else has any questions. But yeah, obviously I'm up for this. Conversation's fun, so I'm up for.
Yeah, we got lots more to talk about.
My wife doesn't enjoy a 2-hour-long musky conversation.
My wife's got a page of notes over here, so I'm just a lucky man.
Yes, you are.
Yeah. All right, brother. Hey, it was awesome. Man. We owe you a huge gratitude. Thank you so much. You have a great night. Everybody else.
Thanks, you too. Thanks, guys. Thanks for tuning in.